This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Mike Emanuel in for Bret Baier. There are new worries tonight for the president over the special counsel investigation. A conservative writer and associate of Trump confidant Roger Stone says he's talking with Robert Mueller's team about a plea deal. Exactly what Jerome Corsi knows and what it would mean for the president are not clear tonight. What is clear, it is not good news for Mr. Trump. Correspondent Kevin Corke is outside the president's Florida resort tonight. Good evening, Kevin.
Evening, Mike. You're right. Jerome Corsi, and I can't stress this enough, is not directly tied to President Trump, though, as you mentioned, he is an associate of Roger Stone, who was a Trump advisor back in 2016. But what we do know is, as he continues to possibly create a situation which could lead to a plea deal with the Mueller team, certainly that is newsworthy, and I think everyone can agree it may not be very good news for the president.
The written answers to the witch hunt that's been going on forever. No collusion, no nothing. They've been finished.
While the president remains steadfast in his denial of any Russian collusion connected to his campaign, the special counsel's office continues to tighten the net on a number of individuals who were close to the Trump orbit. The latest, Jerome Corsi, who, like former Trump advisor Roger Stone, has been linked to the controversial website InfoWars and is reportedly in talks with the Mueller team about a possible plea deal stemming from the ongoing Russia probe. The Mueller team questioned Corsi as part of an investigation into Stone's connections with the website WikiLeaks and its founder Julian Assange. Mueller is trying to determine whether Stone and other Trump associates had advanced knowledge of WikiLeaks' plans to release damaging Clinton emails during the campaign. If a plea deal is agreed to, Corsi would join more than a half dozen others convicted by the Mueller team, though none of the accused has been convicted of crimes related to Russian collusion involving the Trump campaign. While the Corsi news reverberated across Washington, the president, still enjoying the holiday break in Florida, kept his focus, at least online, on the ongoing crisis at the border, where thousands of migrants have collected, hoping to push their way into the U.S. by way of asylum. But from the installation of miles of razor wire to the hours-long shutdown of one port of entry to the authorization of the use of lethal force by the military, the Trump administration has rebuffed that effort, instead applying pressure on Mexico, where there is increasing pressure to move the migrants in one direction or the other.
You got to have borders. You don't have borders, you don't have a country. If we find that it gets to a level where we are going to lose control or where people are going to start getting hurt, we will close entry into the country for a period of time until we can get it under control.
While critics may reject the administration's policies, the president on Twitter today seemed content to pass the problem to Congress, calling on Republicans and Democrats to come together, adding that after 40 years of talk, it is finally time for action. Mike, it is unclear what Corsi might plead guilty to or even offer a plea for, although previously he has suggested he may be indicted for allegedly lying to federal prosecutors, Mike.
All right, something to watch there, Kevin. The Justice Department made a Black Friday request to the Supreme Court. What do we know, Kevin?
Yeah, you're right on the money. The Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court to take up this issue of the president's proposed ban on transgender individuals serving in the U.S. military. The Solicitor General, Noel Francisco, is asking the justices to take together at once all the challenges and rule on this issue during this term. Mike?
Kevin Corke leading us off with the president, West Palm Beach, Florida. Kevin, many thanks. There may be another legal problem developing for the president's acting attorney general. This one involves whether Matt Whitaker received funds for his 2014 Senate campaign when he was still working for the federal government. Correspondent Ellison Barber has details.
It's wonderful to be here.
A federal investigative agency has opened a case file to review allegations that Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker violated the Hatch Act. A spokesperson for the U.S. Office of the Special Counsel, an independent federal and prosecutorial agency which is not related to the team led by Robert Mueller, says the OSC received 2 complaints. At issue are campaign contributions. Whitaker ran for Senate in 2014. According to Federal Election Commission filings, Whitaker for U.S. Senate received 4 contributions in January and February of this year. At the time, Whitaker worked as chief of staff to Attorney General Jeff Sessions. The Department of Justice declined to comment, but a source close to Whitaker pointed Fox News to a 2001 advisory opinion from OSC. It says, quote, an agent or the campaign organization of a candidate who later became a federal employee could continue to organize and promote fundraising events to retire campaign debt.
He's the one who has a $50,000 loan out to the campaign. That money, if it's being used for debt, would be coming to him. He should be disclosing it. So if he gets out of the Hatch Act violation, he may be walking in to a financial disclosure problem, which can carry perjury charges.
From the moment President Trump named Matthew Whitaker acting attorney general, his past has come under fire.
He's called for, quote, pulling the reins back on the Russia investigation. That's hardly a neutral arbiter.
3 Democratic members of the Senate Judiciary Committee are challenging his appointment in court.
Once I choose somebody, they always go through hell.
Some Democrats say a potential Hatch Act violation is enough to prove Whitaker should not serve as acting AG.
The Hatch Act just acts one more thing to a rather long line of very serious questions. Bottom line is, he should leave. He should leave now.
American Oversight describes itself as a nonpartisan organization. The executive director worked as a State Department attorney under the Obama administration. Mike?
Ellison Barber live here in Washington. Ellison, thanks a lot. The former head of USA Gymnastics says the U.S. Olympic Committee was informed about sexual abuse in the sport more than 2 decades ago, long before the scandal involving national team doctor Larry Nassar. Federal court filings cite Kathy Scanlon saying she told the Olympic Committee about the situation shortly after she came aboard in 1994. She says little was done to address the issue. No comment so far from the Olympic Committee. There is said to be new evidence tonight that may further implicate Saudi Arabia's crown prince in the murder of a Saudi journalist. It comes as the prince embarks on a road trip designed to reinforce his status. Correspondent Benjamin Hall tells us so far the prince is staying in friendly territory.
Setting foot abroad for the first time officially since Jamal Khashoggi was killed, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman on a regional tour of allies, showing the world he remains de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia and has support. But Turkey refuses to let Khashoggi's murder pass, and now reports in Turkish media suggest the CIA has a second recording, a phone call in which the Crown Prince gives instructions to his brother, Saudi ambassador to the US, to silence Khashoggi as soon as possible. Asked about it yesterday, President Trump said only, "I don't want to talk about it. You have to ask them." There have been some new repercussions. France today imposing sanctions on 18 Saudi nationals in connection with the case. The same individuals targeted by the US, the UK and Germany. But yesterday, President Trump continued to make it clear he was not considering sanctions on Saudi Arabia.
No, not at all. Saudi Arabia has been a long-time strategic partner. They're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in our country.
But it works both ways, and Saudi Arabia is also heavily reliant on the U.S.
I assure you, without the United States, their planes don't fly, their tanks don't drive, their ships don't sail effectively. They need us far, far more than we need them.
Next week, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman flies to Argentina for the G20 summit. There, he will meet face-to-face with both President Trump and President Erdogan of Turkey. And it'll be very interesting to see if there are bilateral meetings on the sidelines. Mike?
We'll be watching at Benjamin Hall in London. Thank you. Stocks posted their worst Black Friday numbers in years. The Dow lost 179 during a short trading session. The S&P 500 was down 17. NASDAQ lost 33. For the week, it was ugly. The worst Thanksgiving week since 2011. The Dow lost almost 4.5 percentage points. The S&P 500 dropped almost 4. NASDAQ fell 4.25. Up next, whatever happened to President Trump's promise to fill his cabinet with all the best people? First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 6 in Birmingham, Alabama, as one person is killed, 2 injured in a shooting at a suburban mall last night. Police in Hoover say the suspect shot an 18-year-old male. A 12-year-old female was also wounded. The 21-year-old suspect fled and was later killed by police. Fox 9 in the Twin Cities, where authorities are investigating a house explosion in St. Paul this morning that injured at least one person. That person was inside the home and was pulled from the rubble. No word on the victim's condition. 8 residents in surrounding homes were displaced. The cause of the blast was not immediately determined. And this is a live look at a rainy and foggy San Francisco from Fox 2. The big story there tonight, the commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration says the multi-state E. coli outbreak revealed earlier this week is thought to be connected to romaine lettuce grown in California. Commissioner Scott Gottlieb says his agency is still working to determine the exact grow as questions surround the futures of Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke and most recently Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. In tonight's Whatever Happened To segment, my colleague Bret Baier looks at the president's relationships with other cabinet members whose careers in Washington came to a sudden end to see whether the writing may be on the wall.
President Donald Trump is hinting of changes to come.
I'm very happy with almost all of my cabinet.
Before he was president, Mr. Trump vowed he would fill his cabinet with top-notch nominees.
The cabinet, we're going to have all the best people. We're going to find out who they are.
But it turns out some did not have the best judgment. Some of the president's cabinet members are opting not to fly with the public. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price became the cabinet's first casualty. The former Georgia congressman and doctor came into the administration with hopes of helping Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare.
Fixing this situation, as the saying goes, requires an act of Congress.
But in mid-September, a report surfaced that the secretary had used private jets for official business at least 26 times at a cost of more than $400,000 taxpayer dollars. Amid the uproar, including that of President Trump,
I am not happy about it, and I let him know it.
Secretary Price told me he would repay his debt to taxpayers.
You say in the statement the taxpayers won't pay a dime for my seat on those planes, but you're writing a check for, we understand from your officials, $51,887. The total cost is estimated at more than $400,000 for the 26 flights since May. Is that okay?
Well, as I said, there's an ongoing review being done by the Inspector General, and I think it's important that we wait for that.
But the very next day, after less than 10 months on the job, Price resigned, saying he did not want to be a distraction to the work of HHS. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt had a promising start, but his spending habits also got in the way of the agenda.
I recognize there have been very troubling media reports.
Pruitt faced months of scrutiny over reports of lavish spending and suspected ethics violations. Everything from pricey round-the-clock security to spending $43,000 on a soundproof phone booth, and even reports that he asked donors for help in landing a job for his wife. On the 4th of July, Pruitt was spotted attending celebrations at the White House. One day later, he resigned from the administration.
Better be David. We'll never have to use those words on our David.
David Shulkin was the only holdover from the Obama administration, and his appointment as Secretary of Veterans Affairs in February of 2017 seemed to hold great promise for the troubled agency. A practicing doctor, Shulkin would sometimes meet with patients at VA medical centers and vowed to turn the agency around.
We're beginning to finally deal with the issues that have plagued the VA system for decades.
Shulkin's position in the administration came under scrutiny following an Inspector General report that found he improperly accepted Wimbledon tickets and airfare for his wife during a European trip that cost taxpayers more than $122,000.
I do regret the decisions that have been made that have taken the focus off of that important work.
Regrets were not enough.
This was used in a political way to try to remove me, and this is Washington. I'm a big boy. I understand that.
Administration downfalls were not limited to ethics probes. Others felt the president's wrath when they opposed him.
I can say this is a man that's respected all over the world before he even begins.
Rex Tillerson was a very unlikely candidate for Secretary of State, a CEO of a massive company with little experience in politics, but one who had the complete support of President Trump at the beginning. But the two soon publicly clashed over several foreign affairs items, notably the Iran nuclear deal.
Rex and I have been talking about this for a long time. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess it was okay.
And North Korea, with the president tweeting in October of 2017 that Tillerson was, quote, wasting his time trying to negotiate with Little Rocket Man. But perhaps most notably, there was what became known as the moron moment.
Could you address the main headline of this story that you called the president a moron?
The places I come from, we don't deal with that kind of petty nonsense. And it is intended to do nothing but divide people. And I'm just not going to be part of this effort to divide this administration.
Rumors of Tillerson's demise began last November, but President Trump did not dump his top diplomat until March.
My commission as Secretary of State will terminate at midnight, March the 31st.
Tillerson would leave his job just 405 days after becoming Secretary of State, one of the shortest tenures in modern history.
We need to make America great again.
Then Senator Jeff Sessions was one of Donald Trump's most ardent and earliest supporters on the campaign trail. Soon after he was elected, President Trump made the former Alabama senator his attorney general.
It is with great pride, very great pride, that I say these words to you right now. Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
I have recused myself.
But Sessions seemed to quickly fall from favor after choosing to recuse himself from the Russia investigation.
But I am disappointed in the Attorney General. He should not have recused himself.
President Trump publicly lambasted Sessions on social media again and again. Despite the discord, Sessions remained mostly mum about it as he remained on the job.
How's your relationship with President Trump now?
Well,
it's a little rocky there for a while.
Well, we had the president's very clear about when he's happy with somebody and when he's not happy with somebody.
But President Trump kept the heat on his attorney general, saying he would have liked a do-over on his AG pick.
Jeff Sessions never took control of the Justice Department.
Questions about his future went on for months.
President Trump says he will not fire his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, before the November midterm elections. But after that, the president would not commit.
Finally, one day after the midterms, the president officially asked Sessions for his resignation. Now, the question is, who's next? In Washington, Bret Baier, Fox News.
Up next, will Democrats cut military spending once they take over the House? First, beyond our borders tonight, an explosion ripped through a mosque inside an Afghan army base in the country's volatile eastern coast province as Friday prayers were drawing to a close. 27 soldiers were killed and 57 wounded. The blast may have been set off by a suicide bomber or a remotely detonated bomb, but nothing was officially confirmed and details were sketchy. No group immediately claimed responsibility for the explosion. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is refusing to testify in a hearing with lawmakers from 7 different countries. That's according to the Washington Post. Zuckerberg will send a subordinate instead. The lawmakers said in a statement today they still believe Zuckerberg is the appropriate person to talk about data privacy, safety, security, and sharing. Some of Amazon's workers in Europe are protesting against what they call unfair work conditions. The move is meant to disrupt operations on Black Friday. Amazon Spain says about 90% of workers. Jennifer Griffin reports on the possibilities and the ramifications.
If you'll remember, defense was cut over the Obama years about 20% in real terms.
The outgoing Republican chairman of the House Armed Services Committee is warning America, beware of drastic cuts to the defense budget now that the Democrats have taken the House.
What we also saw was an alarming increase in accident rates across the board. What I worry about is slipping backwards and losing the progress that we have begun to make.
Congressman Mac Thornberry says Democrats want to cut missile defense and cut building 2 new low-yield nuclear weapons. The leading Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, set to take over as chairman, Adam Smith, vowed prior to the election in November he wants to cut the $716 billion defense budget.
I think the number's too high, and it's certainly not going to be there in the future.
Smith joked Republicans always try to scare people.
Every threat we ever hear about, we're not ready, we're hopelessly outgunned, outmanned. end. It's all falling apart. We're all going to die, basically. All part of an effort to get us to spend a massive amount of money on any one of 1,000 different things.
A new report from the Washington think tank CSIS, however, warns that 2 decades after 9/11, the number of Sunni Islamists operating around the world, now estimated at 230,000, has quadrupled despite 17 years of war.
We're at near peak levels in the number of jihadist fighters.
And a new bipartisan report by the National Defense Strategy Commission concluded for the first time since the end of the Cold War, the United States is at risk of losing a future war against Russia or China. The reason? Budget instability.
President Trump has told the Pentagon and every other agency to cut 5% of their budget amidst skyrocketing deficits, just when the Pentagon was finally fixing years of neglect that had strained the force and its equipment. Mike?
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon, thanks very much. President Trump is urging the top Republican and Democrat in the Senate to work together on criminal justice legislation. The president tweeted this morning, really good criminal justice reform has a true shot at major bipartisan support. Senator Mitch McConnell and Senator Schumer have a real chance to do something so badly needed in our country, already passed with big vote in House. Would be a major victory for all. Congressional Republicans already have their post-Thanksgiving plates full with budget issues as the days wind down toward the prospect of another partial government shutdown. Correspondent Kristen Fisher tells us where things stand tonight.
The Republicans are in charge. And if the government shuts down, it's on their back.
The congressional clock is ticking. And if members of the House and Senate want to keep the lights on, they'll have to act fast. December 7th is the deadline for Congress to pass a bipartisan spending bill to avoid a government shutdown. The big sticking points, funding for the border wall and protecting the special counsel's investigation.
With respect to the Democrats here in the Senate and in the House, that we hope that they will decide that they want to play a constructive role and put up a record of legislative accomplishment rather than spending all their time launching investigations.
The American people are watching closely, and they want to make sure that justice is served, and if there's a political effort to stop that, they'll notice.
The Democrats have hinted at leveraging their votes by attaching protection for the special counsel to the year-end spending bill. And there's a threat from retiring Republican Senator Jeff Flake, who vows to hold up any more judicial appointments until the Senate votes on the Mueller protection bill. With only 3 weeks left, the post-midterm agenda is looking like a lame duck. And despite Democrats wiping out the Republican majority in the House, President Trump is making his own threats when it comes to the border wall.
We're talking about quite a big sum of money, about $5 billion. If I was ever going to do a shutdown over border security, when you look at the people coming in, this would be a very good time to do a shutdown.
I think that's going to be crucial. We're going to make sure, do everything we can in the lame duck to get that funding in.
Senate lawmakers agreed to provide $1.6 billion for the border wall. But as Democrats prepare to take back the House, they're refusing to give in to the president's demands.
We believe if President Trump stays out of the appropriations process, we can have a good bipartisan agreement and the government can move smoothly forward. Every time he interferes, it gets bollocksed up.
So as it stands, the House and Senate have passed 5 of the 12 spending bills. Some of the remaining measures expected to make it to the floor include tax cuts, the farm bill, and criminal justice reform. Mike?
Kristen Fisher here in Washington. Kristen, thanks a lot. Let's get more on the possibility of another partial shutdown. Rhode Island Democratic Congressman David Cicilline joins us from Providence. Congressman, great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Government funding. President Trump tweeted about it this morning. Republicans and Democrats must come together finally with a major border security package, which will include funding for the wall. After 40 years of talk, it is finally time for action. Fix the border once and for all now. Limited time when lawmakers return. Congressman, are we heading for a partial government shutdown?
Well, I hope not. Look, the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. I hope they don't shut the government down. Last time we had an appropriation process, it worked well. It was bipartisan. The president was not really involved in it. We were able to reach consensus and find common ground with our Republican colleagues, and that moved forward. I hope we can do it again. But again, the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House, so they'll ultimately decide whether we have a government shutdown or not.
Looking ahead, you're one of the top Democrats setting the agenda for the House next year. The reality with President Trump in the White House, Mitch McConnell leading the Senate, are there areas of common interest?
Yes, I mean, we ran on an agenda that we described as demonstrating that Democrats are for the people of this country, not for the special interests, not for the powerful and well-connected. And we identified 3 urgent priorities. 1, driving down health care costs, particularly the cost of prescription drugs. 2 is raising family incomes and particularly focusing on rebuilding the infrastructure of our country with a $1 trillion infrastructure package that will create 16 million good-paying jobs. And finally, taking on the serious corruption in Washington and getting money out of our politics. Those 3 issues are 3 issues the president identified as priorities for him. He hasn't delivered on them, but if he's serious, we should be able to work together with our Republican colleagues to get those things done for the American people.
Leader Nancy Pelosi has spoken about the newly elected Democrats. Dozens of them campaigned on change and new leadership. Take a listen to this.
What matters is that they support a Democratic agenda to make progress for America's working families, and they all spoke out beautifully for the people. Health care, health care, health care, like a jackhammer. That's what's important.
Congressman, is Medicare for all with an estimated price tag of $32 trillion over 10 years, according to a George Mason University study, on the agenda?
Well, look, I think Democrats are very committed to making sure we do everything we can to drive down health care costs. One of the big drivers of health care costs is prescription drug prices. We have a very specific proposal on how to do that. But there are a number of ideas out there to really expand access to health care to drive down costs, allowing people to buy into Medicare, raising or lowering the age for Medicare eligibility, having Medicare for everyone. So I think there are a lot of great ideas. We're going to have a caucus that's more diverse and larger than ever, where we can have a really healthy discussion about how do we build upon the success of the Affordable Care Act and make the healthcare system work even better and drive down costs. And I think people will present a whole range of ideas, and out of that will come some consensus from the Democrats of how we move forward and how we drive down costs and make sure everyone in this country has access to quality, affordable health care.
As a leading member of that new Congress, what about keeping Democrats unified? Congresswoman-elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez participated in a protest in Leader Pelosi's office on her first day of orientation. Do Democrats risk being divided?
I don't think so. Look, we have a lot of new members. They're going to come to Congress with the passion that they demonstrated in their elections. They're going to come with a lot of new ideas, some bold new ideas. And we're going to work together as a caucus to try to find common ground and move forward on behalf of the American people. But I think it's healthy for our party. I think it's healthy for the country that lots of people with lots of new ideas who have just won elections are going to come and contribute their best thinking. So where there's enormous consensus on the overriding issues and really kind of on the core priorities of Democrats, I think we'll have lots of conversations on the edges, but I think it's going to be great for our party, great for the country, because out of that will come the best thinking and the best policies. So I think it's a very exciting time, and we're going to have a lot of new talent, a lot of great new members who are going to contribute significantly to the work.
Is Leader Pelosi a shoo-in to be the next Speaker of the House?
Well, I don't know if she's a shoo-in, but I think she will be the next Speaker of the House. I think she has earned that position. She brought us back into the majority. She was a very effective legislator. She brought us the Affordable Care Act. She brought us Wall Street reform. She repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. She's a very effective legislator. And as I've said before, I don't think you fire the quarterback after you just won the Super Bowl. So I expect she'll be the Speaker of the House.
We'll leave it there. Congressman David Cicilline, looking forward to seeing you back on the Hill, sir. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
The written answers to the witch hunt that's been going on forever. No collusion, no nothing. They've been finished.
I fully anticipate that the next few days I will be indicted by Mueller for some form or other of giving false information to the special counsel or to one of the other grand jury, or however they want to do the indictment. But I'm going to be criminally charged.
And there's this from the Washington Post. Quote, conservative writer and conspiracy theorist Jerome Corsi is in plea negotiations with special counsel Robert S. Mueller III, according to Corsi and another person with knowledge of the talks. With that, let's bring in our panel. Matthew Continetti, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon, Chuck Lane, opinion writer for the Washington Post, and Tom Rogan, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner. So Jerome Corsi, big deal?
Well, we don't know, and we'll have to wait and see, but I think it is interesting that the connection point with Jerome Corsi is obviously Roger Stone, and the connection point there is WikiLeaks, and the connection point there is GRU. So potentially it takes you, in a sort of forensic sense, to a very clear American connection point with the GRU, perhaps for the first time. That's the noble thing. We just have to wait and see. Of course, there have been a lot of stories about the special counsel that have turned out not to be true, some that have. So let's see what happens. I think this week we'll get a lot more clarity there.
Chuck, what do you make of this?
I never know quite what to make of Dr. Jerome Corsi, PhD, who's kind of a flaky loose cannon on the deck of the American political scene. He's an old Obama birther from way back. These comments he's making strangely seem that he's almost boasting, as if he's going to be indicted almost to inflate his own importance in the situation. As Tom points out, it's a very extended chain of culpability, if any, that leads, all the way to Russia. In the meantime, Corsi and Stone, it should be pointed out, are denying that there was any kind of foreknowledge of what Julian Assange had in store for them. I found it kind of amusing to read Jerome Corsi's recounting of his conversation with the Mueller people. They just wouldn't believe me when I denied. And I don't envy Robert Mueller's team having to deal with this particular witness. He is as I said, a bit of a loose cannon.
Matthew, your assessment of the significance?
It's always a bad sign when the words conspiracy theorist or your bio, whenever you're mentioned in the press, I'd say. Look, I mean, this has always been an investigation in search of the original crime. And the original crime is supposed to be a conspiracy to collude with Russia to affect the results of the 2016 election. If this happens, if the plea deal is reached, or if Dr. Corsi is indicted, I'll be looking at the actual criminal information and the indictment, because one question we have to answer is this actually pertains to that crime that Mueller is supposed to be investigating, or is it another of these process crimes that emerges through the conduct of the investigation, as so many of the indictments that Mueller has issued are related to?
All right, so we'll wait and see where the Mueller probe goes. Meanwhile, Congress is set to return pretty soon with a lot to do. Let's take a listen to President Trump and Senator Dick Durbin.
I think probably if I was ever going to do a shutdown over border security, when you look at the caravans, when you look at the mess, when you look at the people coming in, this would be a very good time to do a shutdown.
The American people are watching closely, and they want to make sure that justice is served, and if there's a political effort to stop that, they'll notice.
Matthew, are we looking at partial government shutdown drama?
Maybe. We always go through this flurry whenever we reach one of these artificial deadlines. I'm slightly skeptical of the threat to shut down the government over the border wall. President Trump has had multiple opportunities to do exactly that. And in fact, he has threatened to do exactly that in the first 2 years of his presidency. So here's another opportunity. And maybe he recognizes this may be his last best chance for the foreseeable future to actually get the funding for the wall that he needs. If that means a shutdown, well, with President Trump, he likes to always scatter that deck of cards and see what emerges.
And to be clear, they're talking about giving him some of the money, just not all the money. Right, Chuck?
Yeah, I mean, and even all the money isn't all the money, because as I understand, the maximum he could get now is $5 billion, right? And supposedly the cost of this thing is 20 or 25. Matthew makes a very important point, which is that now that there's a Democratic House for the next 2 years, this mega project of a wall from across the length of the border is even more dubious than it ever was. And, I tend to think that cooler heads are going to prevail on this. As before, the president, for the benefit of his base, will posture and insist that he wants something out of this. But at the end, rather than allow for a partial government shutdown at Christmas time, he will go along.
Tom, your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think the challenge for both sides, the Democrats obviously have an interest in now trying to placate, the leadership certainly new coming into Congress, to placate the base, which will definitely want to oppose anything on the border wall. But at the same time, functionally, does President Trump really want to use that political capital